Imagine this, you walk into a crowded room. There's laughter, conversations, stories flowing all around. Everyone seems to be enjoying themselves, but deep inside you feel strangely out of place. A quiet heaviness creeps in, and you ask yourself, what's wrong with me? Why do I feel drained by social gatherings while others seem to thrive in them? Pause for a moment. What if that feeling isn't a flaw at all, but a sign, an indication of a mind searching for something deeper, something more authentic than surface-level interaction? In today's video, we're diving into one of the harshest truths about human nature exposed by the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. A truth he didn't sugarcoat, but cut straight to the core: why truly intelligent people often step away from social life. Not because they hate others, but because they see social life for what it really is. Stay with me until the end, because the final revelation may completely change the way you understand solitude. What you once thought of as a burden might reveal itself as your greatest strength. Before we dive in, if you're someone who values truth over comfort, depth over superficiality, and self-knowledge over approval, take a moment to support this channel. Hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing your own experience. Have you ever felt more like yourself when you were alone? Your story could resonate deeply with someone who feels exactly the same. So let's begin this journey. A journey from noise to silence, from pretense to truth, from society's expectations to the inner world. And to start, we'll explore Schopenhauer's first and most brutal observation, that much of what we call social life is nothing more than noise, a distraction pulling us away from who we truly are. You might be wondering, but isn't social connection essential to happiness? Don't we as human beings need community to survive? The answer, Schopenhauer would say, is yes, but only depending on the quality of that connection. Most people, he argued, are not seeking truth or depth in others. They're chasing distraction, validation, and little boosts to their ego. For the philosopher, this kind of interaction was hollow, almost a performance. He saw solitude not as emptiness, but as enrichment. A person with genius, he said, is like an eagle soaring alone, sustained by the vastness of the sky, rather than the chatter of the flock. Think about the last time you were in a group. Did you feel seen? Did the conversation touch the core of your soul? Or did it skim the surface, safe, shallow, forgettable? Now contrast that with the feeling of being alone with a book in nature or in deep thought. That's not isolation, it's connection of a higher order. Here lies the paradox. Those who think deeply often feel more connected to the universe when they step away from society. Not because they don't care, but because their threshold for inauthenticity has grown too thin. They crave relationships, yes, but relationships built on truth, growth, and authenticity, not convenience or entertainment. And since that kind of connection is rare, solitude becomes the more honest companion. Schopenhauer put it plainly: the more a man has in himself, the less he will want from other people. When your inner world is abundant, filled with ideas, questions, creativity, superficial connections begin to feel unbearable. You no longer seek company to fill a void. You seek solitude to protect your clarity. And if that sounds familiar, if you've ever left a gathering feeling fragmented instead of whole, you already know what he meant. Solitude in this light is not rejection. It's preservation. It's the soul's way of saying, I need silence to hear myself. Schopenhauer believed that most of what we call socializing is at best a distraction and at worst a dilution of the self. To him, the average person lives in constant noise, gossip, comparison, trivial conversations, endless obligations. Not just literal noise, but mental clutter that drowns out clarity. Now picture this: you're an artist working on a masterpiece. Every few minutes, someone bursts in demanding your attention. Come to this event. Respond to this message. Did you hear what so-and-so said? How much of your vision would survive? How much of your focus would remain? This is how Schopenhauer saw social life. He wasn't guessing, he was observing a pattern. Across history, the greatest thinkers, writers, and creators often withdrew. Newton's reclusive brilliance, Kafka's melancholic isolation, Nietzsche's retreats into the Alps. Emily Dickinson's quiet sanctuary, each of them turned inward, not out of hatred for people, but out of necessity. For them, solitude was the soil where genius could grow. Why? Because being alone strips away the need for mass. In social situations, we constantly shapeshift, altering our words, tone, and behavior to fit the crowd. It's often unconscious, but it's always happening. We fragment ourselves, bending into the expectations of others. But when you're alone, there's no role to play. You can simply be. For the intelligent mind whose inner world is often richer than anything society can offer, this isn't a loss. It's a return. Schopenhauer famously wrote, "The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him. To the shallow mind, life is obvious, entertainment is enough. But to the deep mind, life is filled with contradiction, suffering, beauty, and absurdity, topics rarely welcomed in casual small talk. And the frustration of trying to share deep truths in a superficial world often drives the intelligent to retreat. This is not misanthropy, it is exhaustion. But here's the paradox: the less you seek social validation, the more authentic you become. And the more authentic you become, the more powerful your presence grows, even in silence. To understand why intelligent people so often step back from social life, we need to look at how Schopenhauer saw human nature at its core. He was not a romantic. He believed that beneath every human action lies a blind, ceaseless drive, a will to live, to survive, to propagate, and to dominate. This primal force, he argued, doesn't just shape our instincts. It also fuels our behaviors, our relationships, and even our societies. Social life, then, isn't always a place of harmony and connection. More often, it's a disguised battleground where egos compete for validation, alliances, status, and control. For the average person, this is survival. Socializing becomes a stage for signaling worth building networks or securing opportunities. But for the thinker, for the one who has tasted depth, this constant dance of egos feels shallow, even suffocating. It's not that they feel superior, it's that they feel detached. Imagine standing in a crowd where everyone speaks a language you barely recognize. The words sound familiar, but they carry no meaning. The gestures feel rehearsed, the laughter feels strained. You nod politely, but inside it feels like you're watching a play where you were never meant to be part of the script. That's how the intelligent often feel in social settings. Not because they don't feel, but because they feel too much. Not because they're cold, but because they're attuned to a depth that surface-level interaction simply cannot satisfy. And here's where awareness becomes both a gift and a curse. The more you understand yourself, the less tolerance you have for inauthenticity. The clever learn how to blend in, but the truly wise often stop trying. They disengage not out of rebellion, but as an act of self-preservation. This withdrawal isn't a denial of humanity, it's a recognition of truth. When the noise of society begins to feel like poison to the clarity of your mind, solitude stops being a choice. It becomes a necessity. Schopenhauer once remarked, "The more a man has in himself, the less he will want from other people." Those words strike at the heart of why solitude becomes not just preferable, but necessary for certain minds. When your inner world is overflowing with ideas, questions, passions, and creativity, the superficial quickly turns unbearable. You stop seeking company as a way to fill emptiness because you are not empty. You stop chasing approval because you are already rooted in something deeper. And instead of using social life as a distraction, you use solitude as protection. Think about it. How often do we put on masks to be accepted? Adjust our tone, water down our opinions, laugh at things that don't truly move us. Most of us do it daily, often without even noticing. But as awareness grows, so does discomfort. The soul begins to rebel against pretense. This is why so many intelligent individuals are drawn to philosophy, literature, art, and music, not just as hobbies, but as lifelines. In those pursuits, the self is not diluted. It is expressed. There's no need to compromise, no need to shrink. These creations don't demand small talk. They demand honesty. And honesty is what the intelligent mind craves most. Yet to the outside world, this retreat can look cold. Friends may ask, "Why don't you come out more?" Family may worry, "Are you okay?" Society may slap on labels: antisocial, introvert, even broken. But the truth is, many are healthier, more alive, and more centered in their solitude than most ever are in the noise of constant interaction. Schopenhauer himself lived this way. His days were filled with reading, long walks, writing, and reflection. He didn't withdraw out of weakness, but out of clarity. To him, solitude was not an escape from life. It was preparation for living it fully on his own terms. So if you've ever felt guilty for saying no, for preferring quiet over crowds, understand this: solitude may not be your weakness. It may be your strength. It is the space where authenticity breathes and where you rediscover who you truly are. Let's pause for a moment. How much of your time is spent around people who truly see you, not your job, not your status, not the mask you wear, but your soul? And how often can you speak your truth without needing to translate it into something palatable for others? If your answer is rarely, then your craving for solitude may not be a flaw. It may be a sign of alignment. Schopenhauer believed that solitude is the domain of the exceptional. And by exceptional, he didn't mean the loudest, the most popular, or even the most successful by society's standards. He meant those who are inwardly independent, emotionally self-sufficient, spiritually curious, mentally awake. For these individuals, solitude isn't emptiness, it's fullness. They are not running away from connection, they are returning to their own. But here's where many people get it wrong. Solitude is not the same as isolation. Schopenhauer wasn't advocating for misanthropy, bitterness, or nihilism. He wasn't saying reject the world. He was saying step back long enough to see the world clearly. And this is where the paradox emerges. The smarter you become, the lonelier the path can feel. The more self-aware you are, the fewer people you can truly relate to. But at the same time, the more you step into alignment with your nature, the freer you become. Less connection but more meaning. Fewer people but deeper peace. Solitude for Schopenhauer wasn't absence, it was space. Space for the soul to breathe, for the mind to think, for the spirit to expand. He saw the retreat from superficiality not as a tragedy, but as a turning inward, a sacred return to the self. So ask yourself, what have you discovered in your quietest moments? Who are you becoming when no one else is watching? Would you really trade that depth for shallow companionship or social approval? Most people would, but maybe you wouldn't. And maybe that's exactly why solitude has been calling your name. According to Schopenhauer, one of the greatest illusions of social life is the belief that others can complete us, that happiness will finally arrive when we gain someone's approval, their praise, or their company. He called this the folly of dependence, and he warned that it traps people in endless cycles of disappointment and insecurity. Think about how often we're told that joy comes from external milestones, the perfect partner, the right group of friends, the next big achievement. Yet each time we reach for it, the satisfaction slips away. Why? Because the happiness we seek outside is temporary at best, and at worst it betrays us. The wise, in contrast, stop looking outward for what can only be cultivated within. They understand that solitude isn't about losing something, it's about gaining clarity. It's in solitude that the masks fall away, and the illusions society feeds us are exposed for what they are. Schopenhauer once wrote that all truth passes through three stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. And third, it is accepted as self-evident. The same could be said of solitude. First, it's mocked as antisocial. Then it's feared as loneliness. But eventually it reveals itself as necessary, even sacred. You can see this unfold in real life. Many intelligent people start young feeling misplaced, introverted, sensitive, more interested in observation than in popularity. At first, they try to fit in. They suppress their depth, fake enthusiasm, play the part as society expects. But eventually something shifts. They stop attending events out of obligation. They decline invitations that drain them. They retreat not into despair, but into themselves. And in that retreat, something powerful happens. They begin confronting the self. Without an audience to impress, without approval to chase, they meet their true fears, desires, and gifts. It's terrifying at first, but it is also the first step toward inner mastery. This is why solitude becomes not just a preference, but a form of liberation. It breaks the cycle of dependence and allows us to finally see what was always there, that we were never incomplete in the first place. Solitude is not passive. It is not sitting in silence waiting for life to pass. For Schopenhauer, solitude was active liberation, a deliberate choice to peel away the illusions that society drapes over us. It is in these moments of stillness that the mind begins to see with clarity, both inward and outward. Consider Friedrich Nietzsche, who believed that solitude was not a punishment, but a sacred responsibility. The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly, he wrote. To Nietzsche, solitude was the price of truth, and truth for both him and Schopenhauer was the highest pursuit. When you step back from social noise, something changes. You stop participating in the endless performance and begin observing it. You start to see the patterns why people crave approval, why silence makes them anxious, why distraction is celebrated and stillness condemned. These questions rarely surface in a crowd. They are born in silence. And the more you ask, the more you begin to see the essence of things, not just the surface. This is what Schopenhauer meant when he warned against sacrificing health for the illusion of happiness. He wasn't only speaking of physical health. He was pointing to mental clarity, psychological strength, and spiritual wholeness, the very qualities that solitude protects. But here lies the burden. Once you've experienced the depth of solitude, once you've seen the world stripped of its disguises, you can never unsee it. Conversations that once amused you feel hollow. Relationships built on distraction no longer satisfy. You realize how much of social life is simply noise designed to avoid the terror of silence. And though this realization can feel heavy, it is also freeing. Because in the silence, you no longer need to chase validation. You no longer cling to approval. You stand sovereign, whole in yourself. This is the true reward of solitude, not just peace, but power. Not power over others, but mastery over yourself. Ask yourself honestly, when do you feel most alive? Is it when you're performing for others, adjusting yourself to fit the room? Or is it when you're lost in silent presence, completely absorbed in thought, creativity, or simple stillness? The truth is, some people are not built for constant interaction. They are built for insight. Their nature is not primarily social, it is intellectual, spiritual, existential. They are not here to entertain or be entertained. They are here to observe, to understand, to create. The tragedy is that many never recognize this. They spend years trying to fix their solitude, treating it as a flaw. They push themselves into crowds, hoping to quiet the nagging sense that they don't belong. But what if that feeling is not a weakness? What if it's a calling? Schopenhauer believed that solitude is the environment in which the soul blossoms. Everything else, he argued, is compromise. That's why he wrote so often about the thinker's loneliness, not to glorify suffering, but to show its necessity. Wisdom doesn't emerge from endless chatter. It comes from having the courage to sit with yourself, to face doubts, to wrestle with truth, and to endure silence until it begins to speak. Think of it this way: the seed cannot grow in the middle of a storm. It needs stillness, shelter, and space. The same is true of the mind. Solitude gives it that space, and within that space, something extraordinary unfolds, the birth of originality, clarity, and depth. So if you feel solitude calling, you don't rush to silence it. Don't mistake it for brokenness. Understand it for what it truly is, the ground where your soul can grow roots, where your mind can expand without interruption, where your life can align with truth rather than noise. We've explored solitude as enrichment, as preservation, as revelation. But what then is the ultimate truth that makes this entire journey not just bearable but necessary? Schopenhauer's answer was bold: the highest form of self-realization can only occur in solitude. Not in applause, not in conversation, not even in love, but in the raw, unfiltered presence of your own mind. Think about it. In solitude, there is no one left to impress, no mask to wear, no stage to perform on. There is only you, and that is where the real work begins. It's uncomfortable, almost terrifying, because being alone means facing what you've suppressed, hearing what you've ignored, feeling what you've buried beneath endless distractions. But for those who dare, solitude becomes the doorway to enlightenment. Schopenhauer believed the world is driven by blind will, and suffering is woven into the very fabric of existence. Yet he also believed there was a way to transcend it through detachment, through philosophy, through art, and most of all, through solitude. To step back from the cycle, even for moments, is to taste freedom. And here's the twist: solitude is not just refuge, it's rebellion. To live without constant validation, to create for the sake of truth, to think for the sake of clarity. In a world that demands conformity and endless distraction, solitude itself becomes an act of defiance. The intelligent person who embraces solitude is not retreating from life. They are elevating it. They are choosing meaning over comfort, clarity over popularity, freedom over belonging. And once you've tasted that silence, once you've stood in stillness that nourishes instead of drains, you can never mistake noise for connection again. So here we are. We've walked through the harsh truths of Schopenhauer, explored the paradox of connection, and uncovered the hidden gifts of solitude. But the journey doesn't end in silence. It continues in how you return to the world. Because the more you embrace solitude, the more powerful your presence becomes when you step back into society. You no longer speak just to fill the air, you speak with purpose. You no longer connect out of fear of being alone. You connect from a place of abundance. You are no longer a passenger in life, you become the author of it. This is the sacred paradox. The deeper you go into solitude, the stronger your impact when you reemerge. You stop chasing approval because you've already found approval within. You stop competing for attention because you've already touched something greater than attention, truth. And in that truth, you join a lineage. Schopenhauer walked this path. Nietzsche, Jung, and countless other thinkers walked it too. It's a hidden brotherhood and sisterhood bound not by noise, but by silence, by the courage to be alone. Ask yourself now in your solitude, what have you discovered? Have you become clearer about who you are, what you value, and what you refuse to tolerate? If even part of that answer is yes, then you are already walking the path of the awakened. Solitude then is not weakness, it is not a burden, it is a gift, a sanctuary where the soul grows whole, the mind sharpens, and the spirit expands. It is the quiet strength that allows you to re-enter the world, not as someone who needs it, but as someone who contributes to it. So when the world asks, why don't you show up more? Why don't you join the noise? You can smile gently and answer, because I already found what you're still searching for. If this resonated with you, share your story in the comments. Let others walking this path know they're not broken, not antisocial, but awakening. Like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, this solitude is not your exile. It is your strength. It is not your silence. It is your power.